Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's talk hosted by the Stained Glass Museum on the art of glassblowing. My name is Jasmine Allen, and I'm director and curator of the Stained Glass Museum, which is a fantastic museum located in Ely Cathedral with a really significant collection of stained glass, predominantly from the British Isles, but also from Europe and some pieces from America too. For anyone who hasn't been, this is what some of the displays look like. And if you want to find out more about the museum's collection, today we announced our new digital guide, which is available through the Bloomberg Philanthropies app, Bloomberg Connects, which you can get on your app store. And you can browse the museum's collection from home, and you can also use it in the museum gallery. So well worth knowing about and looking up. You are. This series, The Exceptional Art of Glass, celebrates the fascinating material of glass, its industrial heritage, the skills and ingenuity of contemporary glass artists, and its place in the built environment. And tonight is the second talk in our series, which has been organised to coincide with an exhibition that's currently on in London at 2 Temple Place called The Glass Heart, Art, Industry and Collaboration. And if you haven't been yet, I do encourage you to go. It's on until the 21st of April, and there's some exquisite glass objects as well as stained glass, some of which is actually part of the building, as you can see in this photo here, which actually includes one of our artists' work. In the picture there in the foreground is some work by Chris Day. So on to this evening, as I said, the second in this series, which is focusing this evening on the art of glassblowing. And I'm delighted that we have 2 contemporary glass artists joining us tonight, Chris Day and Ayako Tani. Please do say hello, Chris and Ayako, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
So Chris is joining us from the Black Country tonight, and Ayako from Glasgow. So really lucky to have these 2 glassblowers who both have quite different practice, but both very well established contemporary glassblowers with different backgrounds. So tonight we will look at the exceptional material of glass and the art of glassblowing in relation to Chris and Ayako's contemporary practice. And we will hear from them in turn, with Ayako first and then Chris, and then we will take questions and have a discussion at the end. So Chris, we will see you later, and we're going to introduce our first speaker this evening now, Dr. Ayako Tani, who is an internationally renowned glass artist who specialises in lampworking, which is a type of glasswork in which you use a torch or a lamp to melt the glass before it's blown and shaped with tools. And Dr. Ayako Tani works with borosilicate glass and has developed her own practice of calligraphic lampworking, which embraces the amorphous character of glass. And as well as being an artist in her own right, and she's a very skilled technician who produces glass art for scientific purposes at Glasgow. So there's a kind of cross there between art practice and glass blowing for scientific use. So Ayako, thank you for joining us tonight, and I will hand over to you to share your slides and tell us more about your practice.
Hey, thank you very much, Jasmine, for introduction. So let me share my slide. Can you see this, Jasmine?
Not yet. Try again. I'll stop sharing mine. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Yep, all good.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk about glass tonight. So yeah. So my name is Ayako Tani. I'm artist. I was trained in lampworking in Sunderland at the National Glass Centre. Today, I work as a scientific glass technician for the School of Chemistry at the University of Glasgow. And I also work as a curator for the International Festival of Glass, which will take place in Starbridge in August. So this picture, that's promotional photo taken by the university. I think I may be best known as a glass ships and bottles researcher. The production of glass ships and bottles had a very strong link to the scientific glass industry. So today in this talk, I'm going to introduce how that production of ships and bottles happened and its link to my artwork today. So, next one. Jasmine explained briefly about lampworking, but this is the technique I'm specialized. So many people call it flame working as well, but what we use is a tabletop torch. We don't have a tank full of molten glass in our workshop. We heat glass rods and tubing by a torch flame and shape them. And sometimes we use lathe, so the machine holds it in front of you and we can heat it by hand burner. So this is a really versatile technique, and you can make various things from beads, Christmas baubles to neon signs. But today I want to focus on scientific glass blowing. When we use this technique to make laboratory glassware for chemists, specifically we call it scientific glass blowing. Oh. And this is an example of a scientific glassware made by Ian Pearson. Ian is really well known in this area, so you might know him. He's really active in both scientific and artistic lampworking. I think this picture might be self-explanatory. The skill and the knowledge of crafting something like this. So this kind of production can't be automated. It has to be done by hand, and it takes years of training to master it. And most of the scientific glass today, they are made of borosilicate glass. And Pyrex is one of the brand names. There are other brands, but Pyrex might be well known. And this technique, scientific glass blowing, is registered as an endangered craft skill in the UK. So training opportunity in this technique is very rare. But it was completely different about in the last century. This image is from the 1950s inside the Pyrex plant in Sunderland. The company's name was James A. Jobling. The local people just called it Pyrex. So this company, James A. Jobling, they acquired the license from Corning, New York, to produce Pyrex glassware in the UK. Or it was in 1921. So in those days, it was the British Empire. So it covered the quite large part of the world. So all kitchenware, tableware, laboratory glassware, those Pyrexware were made in Sunderland. And so this picture shows the laboratory division. So these people, they are all scientific glassblowers. So we can see how busy the industry was in those days. And then the industry started to decline in the 1970s. So this division, laboratory division, had a restructuring which started in 1972, and it was closed in 1982. So in these 10 years, from 1972 to 82, these many skillful scientific glassblowers, they lost their factory jobs and they had to move on to elsewhere, or make something else. And so they established individual businesses, and they made all sorts of things. But among them, glass ships and bottles made a significant success, commercial success, as a new enterprise in those days, towards the end of 1970s and throughout the 1980s. And I've been interviewing many of those glass blowers in Sunderland, and they recall that it was so successful as a business, and their income even doubled by making glass ships and bottles since the factory days. And it wasn't only in Sunderland. There were several other places in the UK where the production boom of this glass ships and bottles took place around the same time in the late 70s and 80s. But they all have their backgrounds in scientific glass blowing. Then, well, I don't go into too much about the history of ships and bottles today, but then eventually mass production started, and then the production was outsourced overseas. Then price dropped, quality dropped, then the fashion has changed. We all have storage problems these days, so we don't collect objects. So the market became really small. We don't see them anymore, and there's no maker left in the UK. But those craft skills, the scientific glass-based craft skills, they are now supporting the art and design industry. This is Brian Jones. He has his studio inside the National Glass Centre, and he was originally trained and worked as a scientific glassblower at Pyrex factory. And then he made glass ships and bottles throughout 1980s, and then established this studio called Wearside Glass Sculptures. And he's now the oldest tenant of the National Glass Centre. And he's been serving so many artists and anybody in general public who might bring in their design drawing, then Brian helps them to realize their ideas in actual glass. And most importantly, he is my teacher. He taught me in lampworking craft. And what I want to highlight tonight is that these craft skills they're actually a legacy of the industry, which doesn't exist anymore. So the skill is not sustainable. Once they are all retired, then there will be nowhere we can go, or you can bring in your design drawing and ask for help. So we have this skilled sustainability issue. And this is one of my big motivation to keep working as a practitioner myself. I want to contribute to keep these skills alive. So next, I'd like to talk about my artwork. Many people think that I'm a ships and bottles maker, but that's only half the story. I make other sculptures as well. And I was always interested in memory, personal recollection, community memory. That's why I was interested in the history of Sunderland and the Pyrex industry. And this is one of my earliest work I made as a student. This is a virtual storage of my memory. The original inspiration came from my grandmother's knitting. The ball of wool yarn, the line of wool. I was inspired by how creative a single line can be. So I use a lot of lines, forms of lines in my work. And I think glass is such a special material. It's very soft, runny when it's molten. So I can stretch out a line of glass freely in the air. Then, so the glass is molten at one time, and then the next moment it cools and solidifies, it stays in the shape. So I can mark some doodles in the air. These lines showing now, these lines are the record of my hand's movement. I like how spontaneous and free and how I can record my bodily action in forms of glass lines. And when we try to learn glassmaking, I think a lot of effort is made to take a control of it, especially when we are underskilled. We try hard to control it. But I think the beauty comes out when in the shape, in an unrestricted shape. If I think these unrestricted lines are beautiful, and I'd like to capture the particular moment of the time. These lines are only one-off lines, so this is like a record of the moment. So I've been trying to capture that kind of movement or bodily movement, energy in my sculpture. This is one of those attempts. So this work was inspired from the movement of the flock of birds in the sky. And the detail of this sculpture is like this. So each spike was made by heating the small area by sharp flame and pushing that glass inward the tube. And this exact technique is in fact quite technical. These drawings and this picture, that's it's called a Vigru column. It's kind of condenser. The spikes are made to increase the surface area to cool the steam inside the column. It's completely technical piece of work. But this is a clear case, I think, to show that there's no clear boundary between scientific and artistic lampworking. It's all technique, so it's all up to your imagination how to apply this technique. And tonight I also want to highlight some philosophical link between the scientific glassblowing and my work. As a material and as a technique, borosilicate glass and borosilicate glass lampworking, it allows me partial and repetitive heating. So, well, it's not more than it's more than allowing. It is the method itself. Like in our workshop, we make components first, then let them cool, then reheat them, then join them together to develop from small components to a larger, more intricate sculpture. So I think this might be the big difference to furnace glass blowing. Lamp workers, we don't have to keep the entire piece hot all the time. So, which means I can pick up all the components. It can be very old, like 50 years old, 100 years old. As long as it's compatible as a material glass, I can reheat them and fuse them together and develop them as a new sculpture. So when I do a repair job, for example, the university has many old flasks, and often they have Pyrex logo printed, like Pyrex made in Sunderland badge on brand badge. Then I know that they were made in Sunderland when the plant factory was going in Sunderland. So I feel as if I hear the glassblower's voice, because those flasks could be made by those scientific glassblowers I met through my Ships and Bottles project. So in my imagination, I feel like hearing their voices. Oh, you're also glassblower trained in Sunderland. Oh, I made this flask. Don't mess it up. I hear these through glass objects, through my scientific work. So as an artist or person interested in memory and history, this is a great joy and really inspirational moment to have this kind of experience through my scientific job. So through my future artwork, I'm hoping to express and share these feelings with more audience. So that's my next, that's my ultimate goal as an artist. So that comes to the end of my talk tonight. I'm currently working on 2 major works. One is a radio program about the history of glass ships and bottles, and the other is an exhibition about those calligraphic mark making by using glass as a drawing medium. So the exhibition will take place as part of the Glass Festival in Starbridge in August. So it's the same place where the British Glass Biennale takes place. And there will be many stained glass panels as well. I hope to see you there in August. Thank you very much. Jasmine,
Thank you,
you.
Ayako. Thank you so much for sharing your research as well as your contemporary practice and work as a scientific glassblower, which gives us a fascinating insight into lampworking. I'm sure you have questions for Ayako, and what we're going to ask you to do is to please put those into the Q&A or the chat, which should be at the bottom of your screens or the top if you're on a phone, and Ayako will come back to answer those later, because we're going to go straight on now to our second speaker. So thank you, Ayako, and we will see you again soon. Chris, welcome back, and I'll let you share your slides as I introduce you. So now for something that looks a little bit different, but actually there are some strong connections between what Ayako was talking about and Chris's own practice, not only in terms of thinking about memory and history in relation to glassblowing as a point of inspiration, but also connection to our industrial past, but also in terms of they're both being exhibited at the Glass Heart exhibition. So Chris started out, I believe, as a plumber. So came to the art of glass quite, as he says, late in his career, but has soon become made a real name for himself as a glass and ceramic artist whose works reflect the multiple dimensions of identity and experience. He's particularly interested in thinking about the treatment of Black people in UK and the USA, and trying to express those really complex and conflicting feelings of belonging as well as complex identities through his work. So lots of his work will explore quite complex topics and social tensions, and I'm particularly thinking about his blown glass bound in copper cages, which you can see at the Glass Heart exhibition. As a mixed race artist working in Britain in glass, he I think is quite unique, And that, of course, informs his practice. So really, thank you for joining us, Chris. And we're really looking forward to hearing more about your work. So hopefully you can share the screen, and over to you.
Right. So, as Jasmine was saying, I started late in life. I think I was 48 when I started university, and at that time I was actually searching for other people of colour to have a conversation about what they'd gone through, what their work and what their practice was enabling them to create. But unfortunately, like Jasmine says, I'm one of few, and at the University of Wolverhampton, it was very scarce to see another black person doing glass. I did have conversations with other people, and it was enlightening to hear what they were doing about their experience. But I was always soul searching for somebody to have a discussion about their experience, and still am, to be honest. And that conversation changed. So in 2020, we've seen the murder of George Floyd. And for me, that was a huge turning point, because the conversations I was trying to have were being dismissed, and I wasn't really having much headway of talking about what I could talk about, because people felt uneasy about things, which was right. You know, how can you start talking about slavery or lynching? George Floyd changed all that. And also the Glass Biennale at Stourbridge. It was only through one of the technicians saying, "Why don't you apply to go to the Festival of Glass?" And I think we all have this thing about we're not good enough, or you know, my work's not right, it's not ready yet. But for me, I thought, let's just go for it. And I owe so much to Wolverhampton School of Art for turning this plumbing and heating engineer into this, well, if you want to say, an artist. Because I went as a blank canvas. Here's me in the studio. And it's this skill level that we were talking about earlier, is that I didn't think I had enough skill to be able to produce work. And I didn't think I was ready to actually exhibit it. I was still a student, and I didn't feel as if I was confident enough or ready enough to be able to talk about aspects of what I was talking about. But the university gave me that confidence. Here I am in the studio again, creating these cages. And this is what the work's all about. It's about slavery. It's about identity. It's about being black. It's about lynching. But I'm also dyslexic. So when I went into these studios and I started to produce these pieces of copper to blow into, is that for me, I was already having to research about slavery, but I couldn't put that into words. But the glass gave me them words. It gave me a vocabulary to be able to talk to people by just looking at these objects. And as soon as you see the glass, it's the fragility of the glass trying to break free, just like the human spirit, just like them Africans were trying to break free from incarceration and slavery. So it was already giving me and helping me along to talk of these aspects of what had happened throughout history. And it's that history which I feel so passionate about, that I want to be able to have a conversation with somebody. But all this was denied me when I was growing up. When I was at school, did I learn about lynching? Did I learn about Emmett Till? Did I learn about the civil rights movement? No, I didn't. I didn't have any intake of my own historic past. So I feel embarrassed sometimes when you should know all these names and you should know all these dates, because At 48, I've only just started to really get a grasp of my own identity, my own background. But it's great, isn't it? These bottles that we produce and this glass that we produce, just like this image, is that in a church you have a stained glass window that's prominently telling historic passages from the Bible. And then somebody in the year 2000 can create a piece of glass that's telling stories, the same sort of aspects that have happened throughout history. It's brilliant that a piece of glass can enable somebody to have a conversation and stand there and confront what had happened without feeling that there's any barriers, not feeling as if I'm going to say the right thing, I'm going to say the wrong thing, but just enjoy the glass, enjoy the colors, enjoy the reflective qualities that glass gives you, but also taking the quality of the historic past, which has been denied to so many people. This piece of work is called Message in a Bottle. And for me, that message in a bottle, Africans were stolen from Africa and put onto the Caribbean or into America. But when you think of a message in a bottle, you think of this romantic being shipwrecked and putting a message and hopefully being saved. But these people couldn't be saved. They weren't even allowed to read or write. So they couldn't even write a message to put into a bottle. So I created this, and obviously you've got the chains and you've got this bottle that's actually been pinned down by this rebar on this block. And it's this layering of trying to tell a story, but with something really beautiful that that people first look at. You know, I've had somebody say that, and it was a great analogy of what this piece of work meant to them, is that they just visited Ghana and they'd been to one of these forts where Africans were stored before they were mounted onto the ships. And they said, that stone, what's it supposed to represent? And I said, well, for me, the bottle was produced for Harewood House in Leeds that acquired its wealth through slavery. And I says, I tried to use the same stone that the buildings in Leeds were created from, which is limestone and sandstone. So I said, that's what it represents to me. But this person said, well, after visiting the forts, it's exactly the same stone that's over there. And it was like that rabbit in the headlight moment, is that, wow, how powerful that you can see that. And I was seeing something totally different. And it's that engagement with people and the conversation that it creates that drives me on to be able to talk about this, not how I see it, but how other people see it as well. And it's heartwarming to understand where other people can see my work from. And it's not just all about me. And that's the great thing about my glass, is that, about skill level, is that the skill that I've attained through university is minimal, but the skill to be able to talk to somebody about these aspects that have happened is maximum. And that's what I love, is to be able to talk about things that haven't been spoke about. And I think that's the biggest problem, what we're all facing at the moment, is that we talk about slavery or the civil rights or what happened, but we've still got things happening like what's happened to Diane Abbott that are just going to keep rising their ugly heads until we do start a proper conversation. You know, George Floyd was the right time and it's gone down again. Diane Abbott's the next right time. What's going to be the next right time to start that conversation? And this is where it all started for me. So in 2019, at the Glass Biennale in Stourbridge, I entered this piece, Drain Through. And I was a student, just finished my BA. So I'd not got the skill level to be able to talk that I am today. I was very unconfident as a maker and unconfident as an artist. But this piece of work was hanging there. And I was watching people when they looked at the artist statement, they'd go to see what it is. And then when they've seen the artist statement and it's about lynching, you could see them sort of like go to the other exhibits. Very understandable, because George Floyd hadn't happened at this time. And I didn't have many conversations. And I didn't have any newspapers, and I didn't have any magazines wanting to know about the work. I didn't have any gallery. I did have a gallery actually, but I didn't have anybody wanting to take me on or actually do anything with this or tell the story, except for one person, and that was Angel Monzon of Vessel Gallery. And he came up to me, and I didn't know who this person was, but he gave me his card. I didn't know anything about Vessel Gallery because I was so into the history of what I was creating, and I wasn't interested about people or galleries or even other artists. For me, my main focus was just telling the story and getting this concept out there. But Angel anyway came up to me, gave me his card, and the rest is history. Because without this one person taking notice of what I was producing, although it was quite disturbing, but giving me not just a gallery that represents me, but a person that supports me, mentors me, and has discussions about the work and what we can do to tell this story. And the Biennale, Angel, Wolverhampton, and God knows how many other people have supported me to create and be able to talk about these people. So Strange Fruit, it's about lynching. It's about Billie Holiday's record, Strange Fruit. It's about humans being tortured just because of the color of the skin. How do you do that in glass? If somebody gave you a recipe, right, make me a piece of work about lynching using glass, I don't know where these ideas come from. Like I say, I'm dyslexic, so I normally get a load of imagery, but it's not just images. Like I say, it's the Billie Holiday record. It's the UB40s version of the Strange Fruit. It's listening to them words and not just the tune, and looking at images of children being lynched, parents, God knows how somebody can do this. And then that's just the small aspect, the torturing, taking pieces as 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 medals, really. It was appalling. And I for me, this was my only way of getting it out, was to produce a piece of work and get it out of my system, because the trauma of looking at these images created this. It wasn't that, oh, I'm going to create this and have a conversation. I'd looked at these images at a weekend and I needed to get this out, and this was my way of getting it out. Like I say, I didn't know any history, really. I didn't know anything about slavery, to be honest. I perhaps watched the series that was running in the 70s, but that's all I'd seen on TV. But I came across a story that I think is so horrendous and so heart-aching that I had to produce a piece of work. And as you see this piece in front of you called Emmett Till, is that when I seen the images of Emmett and how they brutally just, the words, I can't even get the words out of what they actually did to him. But a 14-year-old boy to be just, destroyed just because of the color of the skin. I had to produce it, but I produced it in memory of him, but more for his mum and the sacrifice and what she did in showing the audience by having an open casket of him. This is what people have done to my son just because of the color of the skin. They said he wolf whistled at a lady. If he did, so what? But he didn't, but they wanted to lynch him to a tree, and they gouged his eye out, shot his ear off, and then threw him in the river with a great big industrial fan. And they found his body weeks later. So you can imagine that decomposition would have stepped in. So I created this piece of work. Some people say it looks like a heart, and it may do. But for me, it was just a beautiful piece of glass that did perhaps represent the heart, but it was the heart of his mum. And then, perhaps that heart represents Emmett as well, tied to the tree, bound. And then it's in this ceramic pot. you know, this earth that's around the tree, how it all, it's just to create something. But for me, it's to create that story and have that story exposed. Because hopefully when people will see this, they'll just see the beautiful piece of glass. And even without the word Emmett Till next to it, they'll perhaps just go to it just to see and be intrigued. And that's what all my work's about, is just to get people on that level playing field to be able to look at these pieces of glass and then engage with the stories. Like I said, for me, it's been a huge learning curve. The stories are just endless, and I'm not going to say excited, but every time I come across a new story, yes, I do get excited to be able to tell that story to the public and get it out there, because there's so many things that have gone out throughout history that I don't think people will know. They're in history books. So how's somebody from a council estate who's dyslexic going to ever know about the Zong massacre? It's great now we've got the internet, but for me, I wouldn't look through books. So what I'm trying to do is produce work that can engage with people that perhaps aren't, well, similar to me, that aren't going to look through books, but are going to look through images. So I produce this piece of work, and it's called Token Gesture. But for me, like I say, I catalogue a load of imagery in my head, and when I produce these copper cages, is that I'll make them, but I sometimes don't know why I make them. So as you see on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got this cross-hatched cage of copper. But then when you look at a picture from the Zong massacre, the ship, you can see where the window is in the boat. And I think that's where that would have been from. Or it would have been perhaps the top of the pit of the boat where they'd have lifted the hatch up to put the Africans in. I don't know, but I just love the way it corresponds. So this is it. This is Token Gesture. Sometimes, do I feel like that token gesture? Perhaps I do. Do I feel good about it or bad about it? To be honest, I'm not bothered. To be the first person is great, because then you can inspire somebody else. So sometimes you have to be that token gesture, and that's the way things get changed. I think that's how I feel about it. You know, in 2019, nobody was interested in my work. Since George Floyd, everybody's interested in the work. But I say the work, I'm not going to say me. It's the work that people are interested in, the story that it's telling. And that's the most important. And places, institutes, museums, galleries are changing that because of George Floyd. So token gesture isn't just about being myself a token gesture, but it's actually, if you look on the top there, these tokens or manillas were produced to actually purchase Africans. And I didn't realize the story bit about the manillas, that they were actually produced in England using bronze and copper being my industrial tool as a plumbing and heating engineer, but also using that same material to actually buy slaves. And I thought that was a great insight into the background of what these manillas were actually used for as a token. And that's what this body of work is about. Token gesture isn't about me. It's about a manila that's been produced in England to buy Africans as a gesture. And that was the currency. You know, one of these that's on top would buy perhaps a quarter of a slave. You know, four of them would buy a full slave. But it was demand. That's what Africans wanted, and that's what the British produced. So it was just supply and demand. And unfortunately, the supply was horrendous and the demand was horrendous. So after going through all this historic past, is that I'm I'm just I'm just starting to feel comfortable about my own stigma growing up of being mixed race. I don't know who my father is, but ancestry is finding all my ancestors that are out there. And believe it or not, I've got a great uncle that's in Wolverhampton. and only just recently found hold of him. You know, I found out my real name, which is Williams. It's not Day. That's just a made up name. So, you know, one of these persons on this boat, that could be my father. We don't know. We're still trying to find out. But this stigma of me growing up not knowing who my father was has been with me all my life until the last couple of years. And it's only the glass that's enabled me to have that confidence to be able to talk about aspects of that and feeling okay. It's not a problem that you haven't got a father. It's not a problem that you're being a mixed race. Although society made it a problem in the 60s and the 50s, you know, my mum went through hell having me. And not just through society, from family members. But that actually came down to me as well. So I've had to carry all that trauma with me. I'm not going to go into it a great deal, but it is a thing that people suffer with trauma. And I think that's the great thing about glass and doing glass for me, is that it's a way of getting that out. When I was in America last year in Tacoma at the Glass Museum, is that they had veterans that had gone through war, conflicts, and were suffering PTSD. But they were using glass to overcome that. These are real heroes. They're unbelievable people that have gone through traumatic things. And glasses enable them to actually overcome that. Same with me. Glasses enabled me to overcome my traumas and be able to sit here and talk about it. You know, this is what my father and many fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters have had to go through coming to England. You know, no Irish, no blacks, and no dogs. You know, racism is horrible just because of somebody's colour. Hopefully one day there'll be no Mr. Days sitting here in front of you having to talk about this, because colour won't be a problem. But at the moment it is. Diane Abbott's that problem, and it's still there. You know, when will it change? I produced this piece of work called Colourblind. And while I was at Tacoma, somebody says to me, colourblind, does that mean you're blind to people of colour or blind to people that are white? You just see everybody the same? They didn't understand what I was trying to say. So what I'm trying to say when I say colourblind is that society was blind to colour. I was blind myself to my own colour, my own background. That's what colourblind means to me. Society didn't let my mum and my father be together because they thought it was wrong. My own family thought it was wrong. That's the blindness I feel that this colour is. It's not that you're blind, it's in your face, but you turn a blind eye to it. You don't want to see it. That's why I produced this piece called Colourblind. And it's down in the Glass Heart exhibition. This piece you can actually touch. And if you turn it upside down, I've used wood, which is sapele wood, which is from my ancestral home of Nigeria. And then I've branded the bottom just as slaves were branded. These are aspects you don't see, blind to these aspects. This is what colourblind's all about. The rope trying to break free from slavery, the copper cage. And then the colours representing Jamaica, where my father's from, and Africa, where my ancestors are from. And obviously I'm in there somewhere, still trying to break free. But it's got a crown on top, because Africans were kings and queens and they ruled nations, and they made Benin bronzes, which Europeans stole, and also stole how these things were created. They thought, we'll steal the craftsmanship and we'll take ownership, because obviously black people can't do this, but they can. And this is what most black people were facing when I was growing up in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, and even now in 2000. We have the same marches, you know, Racial Equality Welcome Committee when I was growing up. And then we have the same new version. But we're different now. It's refugees aren't welcome. It's not blacks anymore. It's refugees aren't welcome. And I don't know where it's ever going to end. And that's why I created Judge and Jury. I think for me is that we're all judging people at a blink of an eye. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and we're swiping left or right or up and down without taking any consideration of what that person's put into that piece of work that's on Instagram or Facebook or in any form. If it's an artist and they go to an exhibition and they just look at something that's interesting to them and dismiss everything else that's around them. As humans, that's what we do. You know, things that we like, we'll be drawn to. Things we dislike, we walk away from. And that's what I've tried to do with this artwork, is that I've used so colourful palette, is that I want to draw people in. I want it to make a statement. You know, Judge and Jury, like I say, we're all being judged. If it's sexuality, religion, colour, but it can be political. You know, I think we're all in this horrible boat of being the judge, and there's people out there that are the jury. And it's same again. Most of them have all got a crown. They're all. It's my time to actually be proud of who I am, being mixed race. And after being on this earth for 55 years, I can truly say I am proud of who I am. And this is not this ain't down to going to a psychiatrist and sitting there and talking about what I've gone through. It's what glass has given me. It's what the people in glass have given me. It's the cleaner at the Wolverhampton University. It's Vessel Gallery and Angel Monzon that took me on when nobody else would. It's having conversations with people in churches. It's having that exposure that I didn't think my work was worthy for. People are knocking on my door. I have never had to knock on anybody's door to get in. And I'm so grateful for everybody that's around that's been able for me to be able to do that, because it's not me that's pushing it. It's other people that are pushing this conversation. Have you seen Chris Day's work? Oh, I think you should go in this. It's not me. It's everybody else that's supported me. And for that, I am truly grateful. So the glass art exhibition, wow, I just can't believe the work that's in the exhibition is unbelievable. And also the historic, the stained glass windows, as you see in this photo again. You know, it's brilliant that we've got glass from an era a long time ago and glass right up to date, still engaging with people and still talking and having a conversation. And that's what it's all about. It's just about having a conversation and being able to feel safe in a safe place and be able to talk. While I was at this exhibition, somebody came up to me and I told them what it was about and the stigma that I'd gone through. The person didn't know me. They knew of me and they knew of my work. But all of a sudden they started to open up and telling me the stories of how their mum wasn't quite nice to them. And I turned around and I said, isn't it amazing that you don't know me, but you're telling me all your inward secrets? I said, this is what glass can do, given the chance. I love this photo. And it's just, I don't know. It's when you see somebody standing there and just engaging with the work, that's what makes me feel so humble that I've been able to be in an exhibition and people engage. And I think that's what all this is all about, the glass heart. It's all about people just having a heart to open up about conversations that are quite horrible. And that comes to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. We're proud of you and proud of your work as well. I'm delighted that you're, giving us your time this evening. So thank you. Ayako, do you want to come back? And Chris, do you want to just stop sharing that presentation? thank you both so much for sharing your work with us, and for sharing the stories behind your work, the inspiration, because it's some of them are very deeply personal, but also really relevant to kind of wider topics within our society and our community now, both connections to the past, but also helping us discuss, interpret, and understand how that past isn't actually always the past, but affecting the present. So really, really powerful. And I think both of your talks have shown how glass is such a powerful medium of expression for topics like this, and also to remember things that, like Chris so articulately said, are quite hard to articulate in words, but provoke incredible discussions. And so thank you so much for sharing those stories, and also for your skills, because you are both keeping the art of glass blowing alive in different but very tangible ways. And the excitement and buzz around your work is really testament to your abilities. So thank you. Okay, we will take questions from the floor, and I'm sure there's opportunities for Chris and Ayako to have a conversation together as well if they would like. So please do put your questions in the Q&A. And whilst you're thinking of the questions to ask, I'll kick off with one. Research was so central to both of your processes of making, actually, which was really interesting. And I wondered whether you felt that was the norm with artists working in glass, or something perhaps specific to your own approach, and how that manifests when you're coming up with new ideas for new pieces. Do you do the research and then make the piece, or are you starting to make a piece and doing the research alongside? Could you tell us a bit more about the process and the connections?
Yeah, so for me, obviously, if I read a story or see a story, then you're going to research more into it. And like I say, being dyslexic, it's one of them things I don't really want to do. I just want to look at images, but you've still got to get that story. You know, looking at an image, you can see only so much. So you have got to start researching. And that's it. You know, I think the more you delve into it, the more layering you can put into your your artwork as well. So you might just have one story, but a bit like token gesture, it gets layered then. So you can incorporate into that one piece more story. So you can tell more of a story, you know, and use different materials as well. Not just use glass. Use more, you know, different things to be able to explain what you're trying to say. So not just research, you know, for me, and I think for most people is that we don't want to know a lot of historic past, and we don't want to get into all that, but it is needed, because you can't tell that story without that research and that foundation. So although it's perhaps the hard bit of practice, we all like to just keep making things, but you've got to know why you're making these things and why you're using these different materials, or else it'll just become, you know, just something that looks pretty. And for me, it's not about looking pretty, although it is. It's about that storytelling. You know, you've got to have a start, a middle, and an end. It's no good just having an end.
To me, research and practice, they are same thing, like both side of the same coin. I can't really leave one or other. I think research is it's part of the practice, and practice, like studio practice, is also one method of the research. To me, research is not only going to the library and read books. It's about examining the material, test the new method, and see how it feels to your hand, or how the glass behaves to the certain temperature and pulled by the gravity. It's both part of the creative activity. And to me, reading and writing and communicating with people in English, it's really difficult, but curiosity wins.
I can see that. I liked in your practice where you've got the ship bottles and you've got the diagrams that are so, you know, you've got to go by the millimeter, and then you go all fluid. You know, for me, all mine's just fluid. I don't do drawings and I don't do designs much. You know, the creativity is through the glass, like what you was doing. Let the glass speak and see where that takes you. So, you know, that's amazing that we've both got that. We want that freedom and we want to explore things and go outside, work outside the box or outside the bottle in your case. And, you know, just explore what glass can do if it's let to do what it's got to do.
And let's go back to kind of the techniques and skills in society at large. Someone asked a question about the scientific glassblowing skills, Ayako, that you mentioned are kind of under threat. There's few people around, and they want to know a bit more about that, and also, I guess, why we've got people like Chris who are coming to the medium and producing these exciting things, but that skill in particular is on the decline. So is there a way in which we can kind of contextualize that pattern of change?
Well, I'll go first.
Sorry. Oh, I'm trying to find the question. I just found the question. Should I answer the question?
Yeah, if you can say a bit more about the skills.
Why it's dying, if it's important. I wonder if we have any chemists in our audience tonight. If there's any, maybe they can feed their knowledge as well. To my understanding, the trend in the chemistry changed as well, so that there's not much wet chemistry experiment required these days. That's probably one of the reasons. And today we have many plastic containers. That's another reason. And also, but like people are less aware of what's possible or what's the great benefit to have in-house glassblower and get some bespoke glassware made of. So they don't have to compromise with standard flasks just bought from elsewhere. I think that's the personal awareness, what's possible and how great it can be.
I think for me, like I say, I'm still a baby at this, so but I've got a lot of thoughts. Is that traditional glass blowers have produced traditional glass, and all we see is that is it's in antiques and it's in charity shop. And people have it's that trend. It's nobody wants them now. As for studio glass, it's still young. 1960 it started off. So we're very short in studio glass and being represented in this artistic form that's happening today. So when you see people like myself producing works that are telling stories, 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't a thing that was acceptable if you was going to be a glassmaker. You know, you had to go through the tradition of making stemware or goblets or whatever was produced because it was a production. So that's where I feel where some of this decline started, is that you wasn't being exposed to be able to be yourself. You was having to conform. And then the other biggest problem that we're facing is that I think glassmakers or young glassmakers, it's like pitty pitty bang bang. We don't see the youngsters doing it. There's the institutions that could have provided free spaces for youngsters to be able to delve into glass has been cut off, and it's not even been established. So you haven't got this sort of like production line of age of people going through these different institutes. You know, I'm talking to people that are 50 plus, 30 plus. Where's the 14-year-olds and the 16-year-olds? And even if they are out there, where are they going to be doing it when all the institutes and the programs are being closed down? So unfortunately, my pieces are in museums, but I'm going to become a museum piece myself as a glassmaker, because nobody's taking that foothold of saying, look, if we don't do something soon, we're going to lose it. Just like we've lost Wolverhampton University, just like different other institutes are losing their courses. But somebody could have done something years ago. And I feel that's where my passion drives me, is that I've got to keep doing this, because if I don't, if I just give up, like I say, I'm going to become a museum piece, and I don't want to.
Well, there's some interesting parallels there with stained glass as well, which the traditional craft of stained glass is also listed as endangered, and similar problems with closure of courses. But I think the same thing that you were saying, Chris, is that people weren't allowed to be themselves. They had to do that traditional apprenticeship route, produce windows that a church would expect to have, that very traditional outlook, which is why it's so nice to also have Pinky McClure's contemporary piece in that exhibition, which again, interestingly, is all about storytelling and very personal. And all of those works are being seen by a wide variety of audience at the moment. So that exhibition is really important in challenging those perceptions, I think, and hopefully showing that there is a bright future. We just need to get the youngsters to connect and get them, having a go with the hot glass, which is a challenge practically.
That is and I think that in both our practices, it's enabling somebody to have a go. It doesn't matter if it's stained glass, if it's scientific glass, if it's just glass blowing, fused glass, anything. And when people say there are opportunities out there, yeah, there are opportunities out there, but it's at a cost. And for some people on universal credit, then it turns elitist, So, if anybody wins the lottery, please just set up a hot glass studio, or a studio where people can go in and keep this alive.
Yeah, and it takes time as well. I think in those factory time Pyrex, the young apprentices spent 5 to 6 years. 6 years apprentice, that's many years. And young people these days can't spend 6 years only, and that's like a full-time job as a trainee. And so, yeah, that's the difficulty we have.
We've talked about a lot about those problems, and someone has asked, do you think that the glass techniques that you represent will eventually die and be lost to the future, or do you have more hope than that?
I have a slight hope than that, because there are some mad people like myself who just want to do it without anyway. So it won't disappear. I don't think. But in order to keep the number, because only one person can't do big things. In order to develop it to some extent, we need to work with like institution, like education, industry, art and science together, interdisciplinary.
Well, I've got a cup half full, or is it? So it's for me, it's great at the moment, but I'm finding it's from different places, like America, South Africa. It's different. It's the other continents that are really pushing the practices. Obviously they've got more money, but it does filter its way down to England eventually. So at the moment it's brilliant out there for me. But I feel, although it's brilliant for me, this is where the passion comes in. I want that brilliance for somebody else as well. So that's where that sticky thing is. It's great at the moment, but what's it going to be in 5 years' time, 2 years' time? We really don't know. We just hope that people, club together and start to make more events, more exhibitions, like the Glass Heart, which has just been phenomenal. So yeah, it's bright. It's bright at the moment.
And can you say a bit more, both of you, about how you got into glassblowing, where you first came across it? And someone has particularly asked Chris, when you began your degree, did you always think glassblowing was going to be your creative direction, or were you kind of shown it? And how did you both get into this? So we'll start with Chris, and then Ayako, perhaps you can say as well.
All right, so I didn't get into glass at all. It was my wife that took me to university, and I meant dragged me there for an opening night. And I didn't know anything about glass. I knew nothing about ceramics. Obviously, them doors weren't open to me as a child, and even growing up, it was a thing that I did have no interest in. Going through university, obviously, you've got to go through these different aspects of learning how to do stuff. And the glass pot shop studio scared me to death because it's a daunting place to be in. You've got this stuff that wants to kill you and burn you. So, you know, ceramic on a potter's wheel is quite tame. But, you know, 1200 degrees glass is, you've got to know what you're doing. And it's that skill of trying to learn. And when you've only got 3 years or 1 day in the hot studio, you're not going to learn a lot. But what I did learn is when I did go into that furnace and it dripped on the floor, it was that energy that the glass had. As soon as you put heat into it, it comes alive. It's got its own way of wanting to do stuff. And if you don't control it, then it's in control and it'll do what it's want. And that's what I love. All my life I've been controlled either by my wife or by society. And this was the first time I felt out of control. And it being dyslexic, it was hard to grasp. But once I'd got a grasp of being out of control, it was beautiful. And then that's all I've done. I've been out of control, and the glass has done 50% of the work, if not 90%. You know, I'm just the like in an orchestra. You know, I'm just the guy with the batons playing with this glass and trying to guide it to where I want it to go, and then it does everything else. So that's how I got into glass. My wife, bless her.
Well done, her.
Definitely, definitely.
How about you, Ayako?
Me, glass is actually my second career. I was born and grew up in the middle of Tokyo, the busy metropolitan city. I think as a child, I always liked handicrafts, like wood furniture making or metalwork, woodwork, but I just didn't have a chance to do it myself, and I didn't know how to enter that world. So my world was just like busy city life, and my first job was like office worker at a computing firm. So that kind of desperate feeling to looking for something to make by hand, that desire brought me to glass making. I don't remember why it was glass, not wood, no metal. But when I started, when I first melting glass, that was the moment. I never looked back. I never regret. I really love touching the material and make objects by my hand, not the controlling the keyboard of a computer. So that's what I love. And yeah, and I listen to Glass's voice, theoretically, how it melts and when it wants to flow. That's a beautiful coordination between material, my mind and body.
It's magic hearing you both talk about glass and how you come alive and your passion. So thank you for sharing that with us. We have a couple more minutes. If I don't know whether either of you want to say a bit more about where people can find out more about your work or perhaps see your work in collections. We'll also share some links to your websites and practice with people who book tickets. So maybe your 1 minute, 30 second promo opportunity for both of you.
Please visit the exhibition at 2 Temple Place.
So obviously I've got Vessel Gallery that represents me in London. You can visit his website or go to the gallery, or various museums around England. But I get a little bit embarrassed. So
and the International Festival of Glass.
Well, we don't
Starbridge.
know. Yeah, well, we don't know yet. I've entered it, but we don't know who's going to be actually successful to get in. But hopefully, Stourbridge Glass, the Biennale, or there's the Stourbridge Glass Museum. There's a piece of work in there. And there's going to be a new piece of work unveiled soon. I can't say too much, but it will be going towards Liverpool. So that will be in August time. Yeah, and if you get to the Chrysler Museum in America, we've got an exhibition over there so yeah, there's a lot going on. But just keep an eye on my Instagram, I suppose, and Facebook. That's the best place to find out what's happening in the day art scene.
Well, we'll be sending links to your websites and social medias around to people who bought tickets. So this is my opportunity to thank you both again so much for giving up the time in the evening to share more of your work, which we were absolutely delighted to hear about. And a reminder to you all that next week we'll be looking at how glass is made on a large scale for contemporary architectural glass. So this is, if you like, at the opposite end of the scale to the endangered traditional stained glass craft. This is looking at actually the exciting possibilities of coloured glass in architecture with Andrew Moore, who has overseen a lot of different projects around the world for enormous coloured glass architectural pieces. So we're kind of going back to more stained glass, but it's really nice today to be reminded of that magical moment with the hot glass, because of course all mouth-blown coloured glass used in windows starts just like that, with a very skillful person blowing it into shape. So thank you for joining us this evening. I hope you might join us next week. There are tickets available. Go onto our website. And yes, good night, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ayako.
Thanks, Jasmine.